talking all that bullshit. I'ma put it to you like this, yo.
This is for the nerds, this is for the brainiacs, this what we deserve. Go ahead and play it back, you ain't gonna touch me, you not gonna do nothing, you are not above me. I bet you wish you was me, I know it, I know.
Is poppin', everybody, and welcome back to another special episode of the Only Friends podcast. Well, you know, it's me and my only friends, which includes, but is not limited to, Hunt. What's poppin', baby? How you feeling today?
I'm doing well, Connie. I'm glad to be here.
All right,
I'm enjoying the fact that when we prep for these things, it's like we sit here for 5 minutes just watching the countdown, and then the 15 seconds when the intro sequence is going, there's so much activity because we always wait until 15 seconds before we figure something out.
When you say we, who do you mean?
I'm not naming any names.
Would you say it would be my sidekick, Matt Berkey, that's never ready?
No comment.
He's just running around looking for headphones because he doesn't know how to turn his off and shit?
Some of us have a lot more responsibility to this podcast than others, Conrad. You know, like,
God, Guapo.
Don't get me involved. I've already done my part.
I have to walk the dog, i.e. make sure that you get here. I have to ensure the run of show is in place, get Guapo the assets, you know, talk to Hunt a little bit about what's going on in the world.
Plan what we're actually going to talk about.
Yeah, catch him up on everything United States because...
you don't even know.
What are you talking about? I'm fucking locked into the Olympics right now.
Is there stuff?
There's nothing else going on in the United States, just the Olympics.
Well, Kamala's now a flip.
You know, it's funny. I have not watched a single minute of the Olympics.
That's
wow.
I was about to ask you, and then I realized that's probably not weird because my understanding of the Olympics is that England isn't really a big powerhouse.
Well, Great Britain is like Great Britain always finishes top 10 in the medal table, like consistently.
Well, I guess that's fair. They're probably pretty big, right?
And I would say maybe top 6 or 7. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where they are right now because I check BBC Sport news for like football, soccer news and stuff, and I always see the updates. Like it's always every day. It's like Great Britain won this medal, that medal, whatever. I just don't actually care about it. Like I used to watch the Olympics, and 2012 when they were in London, I went to some events. I just didn't. I didn't care after that, I guess. Yeah, they're number 5. There we go.
Okay.
They're not too bad.
Yeah, I guess they are relatively...
Man, Australia punching above their weight. Country of what? 7 million people, 3rd in the medal table. That's wild.
But have you seen the people?
Swimming.
Have you seen the people in Australia?
I mean,
they're fucking athletes. They're out there surviving every day.
There's no sporting rivalry like England and Australia. That's 100+ years of rivalry.
Why do you guys pick rivals with all of the countries that you helped build?
It's not that we pick them. It's they pick us.
Right.
They you know, we sort of help build these countries, and then they sort of grow with this massive resentment of us.
Hold on. Let's do a little deep dive into history. You didn't help anything. You said, hey,
I'm talking
criminals.
about Australia.
Well, same thing with Australia, right? You sent the criminals off to Australia.
Yeah, look, I'm not giving us any credit. Like, I don't like my country any more than anybody in this country does. But like,
Australia is like the Alcatraz of England.
Well, however you want to describe it, but yeah, I mean, basically, I'm saying the rivalry doesn't come from us. The rivalry comes from them all fucking hating us.
Right.
Like Australia, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, Germany, Argentina, all these different countries that we have sporting rivalries with, they all hate us. We're just like, hey, bro, like we're just trying to actually succeed at something for a change, and we just fail every time because all these countries are better than us at most of the sports we care about.
Yeah, that man, history has not been kind to you guys.
No, and the future probably won't be either. But you know, we're just a tiny island country.
Well, you guys did well with Brexit.
Yeah, we did great. You know, I think eventually what's going to happen is things are going to revert to like an equilibrium, and in like 500 years, an island country with 60 million people is going to be about the same place as every other country with 60 million people. Right now, we're still like, we tried, you know, we did a bunch of horrible shit for a couple hundred years and tried to colonize everywhere, and we're still kind of living off that. You know?
Yeah, right. It is pretty wild. I imagine the strategy was like, okay, so we got this land. It's way off in the Pacific, and I got to tell you, it's inhabitable. I mean, everything will kill you there. Literally, you're walking, you step outside and like death, boom, immediately.
They discovered Australia, and they were like, we've got to send the criminals.
Exactly. Here. It's like, okay, so what we're gonna do is rather than put these guys in jail and you know cost ourselves a lot of expense to house these, fuck them. send them to Australia, let them live, and all you did was build a bunch of survivors.
Yeah.
That lineage, they're tough.
100%, man. I've been watching Australia beat England at rugby, at cricket for so long. You know, Australians, there's a sporting DNA that they have that British people absolutely do not have.
Yeah. They're literally born from the darkness.
Yeah, man. And even for some sports that you wouldn't think, like in athletics and like a lot of the other Olympic sports, like small country, but they absolutely crush it compared to what you'd expect. So props to Australia.
I read a book. I think it was either The Sporting Gene or the sequel to that, which I can't recall what it was, but it was by, I think it was David Epstein wrote it. And
you got to get the right Epstein.
I know, that's why I was very, careful.
If you're going to name an Epstein, you got to get the right one.
Yeah, unlucky last name, but I think it was David Epstein. Sporting Gene, I think, was the first one, and then there was a follow-up to it that was mostly about specialization. So I think it was actually the follow-up book, and I can't recall what it was off the top of my head right now. But basically, the introduction to the book was comparing Federer to Tiger. And like Federer never specialized in anything. He played dozens of sports growing up and then just found and fell in love with tennis, where Tiger had been golfing since like age 3. And the argument was that against specialization because genetically speaking, it's rare that you are just going to fall into the path of the sport that you are genetically most built for. Now, very likely Tiger did, but you know, who knows? Maybe he would have been just like a world-class athlete in something else.
Didn't Tiger have like a dad that like pushed him at golf as well? Like,
Range, yes. Thank you, Zachary. That was the name of it, was Range. So later on in the book, he was talking about Australian Olympic athletes. And because they're a warm nation, they don't really compete well in the Winter Olympics. I don't even know if they compete much at all. And they
hard to go skiing in Australia.
Right. So obviously they do really well. They dominated swimming. They do really well in track and field and things of that nature. And there was this girl, I can't recall the specifics. It was years ago I read this, but basically there was this girl who was a standout athlete, but wasn't reaching her full potential in whatever summer game sport it was that she was competing in. Like I feel like it had something to do close to the Ironman. Like she was a open water swimmer or something along those lines. And it was like clear she was just like an athlete, right? Like one of their best, but she just was underperforming in this particular thing. So I think the way the story went was they were looking for athletes to compete in the Winter Olympics at the long distance ski jump. You know, the one where you just like hit a ramp and
dude, that scares the shit out of me.
Right. So
I would be so scared doing
You're just
that.
flying in the air.
So I think if I recall correctly, again, there's a solid chance I'm getting some of these details wrong because my memory doesn't serve me well, but I believe they were able to do like some form of genetic testing to kind of like place athletes into their proper domain as far as like what they're best genetically fit for. And it turned out that she was like most genetically fit for this like acrobatic type of endeavor. So she started training, and I believe it was like one of her first jumps. She sets the world record and breaks her legs because she doesn't know how to land.
Wow.
Get out of here.
Ultimately goes on, I believe, to medal then in the Winter Olympics. So the long story short is basically like we're all so fucked.
You know what? I feel like if you break your legs, it shouldn't count. Because what's for stopping you from just like a guy who doesn't know anything about how to do it? You just fucking launch yourself. You don't care about what happens.
Well, paralysis is what's stopping.
No, but like theoretically though, if you set a world record in something and you also almost die in the process, I just don't think it should count. Like, it just doesn't feel right. But that's just me.
Don't be such a stickler, Hunt. You know.
But I mean, imagine another Olympic sport. You know, there's a lot of Olympic sports where you could set a world record if you didn't care about your own safety.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I'm pretty confident she did care about her safety. She just wasn't well trained yet. You know. But yeah, I think the way that the story ultimately went was she went on to it might have been Sochi or one of the more recent Winter Olympics, and she ended up medaling in this particular event, which is just kind of wild when you think about it. Like somewhere in your early adulthood when you're reaching your peak athleticism, somebody just taps you on the shoulder and goes, hey, I know you've been training for this thing your entire life and this is what you love, but actually you're going to be really great at this other thing.
Yeah,
and it's like
recruited.
Yeah. The book is really fascinating. Actually, that makes me really want to go back and reread it again, because there was so much discussion on developing these sort of tests that would allow you to basically get a genetic profile for what you're built for. So like another good example is Phelps is specifically just well constructed for swimming. Like everything about his genetics.
I mean, look at him. Like, he's like a giant, right? Isn't he like super tall?
He's very tall, but the biggest thing is with swimmers, quite frequently you'll see an imbalance between their torso and their legs. They actually
so
have
it's like his body proportions.
Yeah,
I guess.
he's built with very long legs and a long wingspan, or sorry, very long torso and a long wingspan and very short
like
legs.
a triangle sort of. Frame,
Shockingly, I'm built the same, but not the same at the same time. I have really short legs. I have the same inseam as Uncle Dan, who's like literally 4 inches shorter than me.
That's pretty wild.
I have like a very long torso. Like t-shirts sometimes don't fit because I have to get like extra tall. Not extra tall, but like tall. And I have a really long wingspan. Landon and I have the same wingspan. And he's
like what,
4,
6'6"?
4.5, 5 inches taller than me.
Yeah.
I think he's like 6'4", 6'5".
So you just have the
somewhere around.
legs of a much smaller man.
Yes, yeah. Or the torso of a much larger man, depending on how you want to look at it. Yeah, right. I have the wingspan of like a 6'4", 6'5" guy.
Wow.
But the legs of a 5'9" guy apparently.
Was that good for your baseball career?
It was great for pitching.
Baseball.
Yeah,
that's
because it's all
helpful.
lower body torque.
Right.
So it's not good for the non-throwing positions. Like it's not particularly helpful. I was left-handed, so I played mostly like first base. Not particularly helpful there. Not particularly helpful with hitting, because a lot of what makes you a great hitter is staying short to the ball. So having long arms, not really helpful.
That's interesting.
But getting like a lot whip.
It's so interesting that baseball and cricket, the things that make you good at a certain skill, it's the same stuff. Like the bowlers in cricket, for the most part, you want to be tall. Like there are some guys who are like freakishly tall who are specifically really good at the cricket equivalent of pitching because they're so tall. There's like a Pakistani guy who's like 7'1" who just recently retired, and there's like other guys who are crazy tall. And then if you're a batter, you want to be smaller. Like a lot of the best batters ever in cricket are like 5'7" or shorter, because it gives you like lower center of gravity, better balance, like all this stuff.
Well, it makes a special sense too, because you have to bounce the ball in cricket, right?
Yeah, you do.
So the ball's always coming from down up.
And that's why taller is good, because it's a different angle, right?
Yeah.
When I say short baseball players, who do you think of?
You're not going to remember him, but
Kirby Puckett.
coincidentally enough, I believe his last name was also Epstein. He was a second baseman.
Theo? No, that's the Cubs.
That was the
GM.
Cubs GM.
Yeah.
No, he won like MVP for, it was either the Angels or Arizona, maybe like 15 years ago.
Okay.
I think he was like 5'6", but Altuve.
Yeah,
obviously.
the people that came to my mind was Altuve and Chuck Knobloch.
I don't think Knobloch was that short.
I don't know why I thought he comes to my mind.
He
but
just got the
does.
yips where he couldn't throw to first base.
Kirby was a little guy, right?
Kirby was smaller, yeah. He
Tony
was pudgy
Gwynn?
too. Tony wasn't. I don't think Tony was short.
Oh, maybe he was just chubby.
He was just fat.
Okay.
Who's like the tallest baseball player?
Probably Randy Johnson.
Randy Johnson was very tall.
gotta be up
Aaron
there.
Judge is very tall.
How tall are we talking?
Randy Johnson
6'8", 6'9".
Randy
Okay.
Johnson was bigger than that, I think.
Because it's interesting.
There's definitely been like a 7-foot pitcher before.
Right. It's interesting for the UK because the UK doesn't really play basketball or or any other sport that like requires you to be really tall. If you're a really tall kid in England, you will get pushed into either cricket or rugby. Because in rugby, there's certain positions where if you're just an absolute beast of like 6'7", 6'8", you can be an incredible asset.
Did you see the photo of the female rugby team? Because they do that like lift.
The line out.
Yeah.
Oh, when she fucking grabbed her and put her over her head?
This girl like straight shoulder presses this other woman.
Yeah, they train for that.
No, but like as she's catching the ball, she like full brings her back and then forward again. It was just like the most insane display of athleticism I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's crazy. But rugby players, they stuff like that. They train for. Like they'll train in like lifting each other up because of that.
Yeah, it's
that
like
element of the game.
gymnastics almost.
Yeah,
Wild.
Rugby players are some of the craziest athletes. Like there's some guys that you just would not believe in terms of like physicality. There's guys who are like they're built like a bodybuilder and they're 6'8".
Right, yeah.
It's
That's like
absurd.
Aaron Judge for the Yankees. He's the second heaviest player in baseball right now.
Wow.
And he's just like 5% body fat.
Yeah, that's great.
But he's so
fucking
tall.
animal.
Yeah, sorry, it was David Eckstein.
Eckstein, not Epstein.
Yeah, thank you for the correction. He won the MVP of the World Series, not of the regular season, but very small guy. Like, had no business being. And also, by the way, for Altuve, I don't know what they list him at. 5'6", 5'7". I don't give a fuck what they say. This man is no more than an inch taller than 5 foot tall. He's the smallest human I've ever seen step into a major league batter's box. Like, the Pirates just played Houston the other day, and I was just like looking, and I'm like, how the fuck did this guy get this far and somehow maintain talent? He looks like he's swinging a telephone pole.
Does he have like the small man syndrome where they're really angry all the time?
I mean, he hits the ball like he's really angry.
Okay. It's funny. I was watching this documentary the other day about it was like a true crime thing about this guy who like killed his girlfriend or something. And he was a short guy. He was like 5'5". And every time they had like a clip from an interview with him or something in the documentary, he kept like trying to claim he wasn't short. Like his whole thing,
right.
He was being accused of murder, and he was more concerned about whether people thought he was really short or not. It was really funny.
Oh man, you love to see it. All right, last thing before we get into some of the actual strat that we came here to talk about. Have you guys seen the betting markets for the presidential race right now?
Yeah, it's pretty
I
sick.
have not seen it.
So prior to Biden pulling out, I think Trump was like 2.5 or 3 to 1 favorite.
Yeah.
It's a stone flip right now.
Yeah.
And
I don't know if I buy that.
When Kamala,
that's what I'm saying.
Honestly, I don't know if I buy that.
when Kamala
That's what I'm saying.
entered the race, she was minus 260. I'm sorry, plus 260. I want to say it was, or plus 250. Now it's a dead flip.
I feel like we're looking.
It's not going to be close.
I'm with you, man. I feel like we're looking at a Mayweather-McGregor situation here.
Well, hold on. We don't know what side Guapo was even talking about.
Yeah, I do.
I think Trump is just going to run away with it.
I actually agree with him. Like I've said, and I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know shit about shit, and like Nate Silver would be the guy to really key in on something like this. But like this amount of movement post assassination attempt is astonishing to me. Like when the assassination attempt happened, I think that anybody who was hopeful that Trump would not get elected gave up.
Yeah.
I think like nationwide, the country was just like, well, 4 more years of this shit.
Biden gave up. That's why he dropped out.
Yeah.
Like, that's the only way.
Yeah, and like from my perspective, it's like, well, if initially, or if like anything of the initial conditions would have suggested that Kamala would have been a flip versus Trump had she run, they would have just ran her instead of Biden. But maybe like it just doesn't. Maybe they would rather just like lose with tradition.
Yeah.
Than have a shot at winning.
I don't think they had the polling data to support that until recently. That's the thing. Like I think that for the longest time they held out hope that the polls were going to change for Biden.
Right.
And I think like now we've got to a point where we're close enough to the election that I mean the reason Biden dropped out was because people were showing him data that was like, you're not going to overcome this disadvantage in the polls in the swing states. Like you have to leave it to somebody else.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to win. And as soon as he like kind of realized he wasn't going to win, he was like, okay, I'm going to step aside.
Quite honestly, he probably just logged on to Twitter and was like, okay.
I mean,
possibly.
All right, let's be clear. First of all, he didn't log on to anything. I don't think he has the capacity to do that any longer. Secondly, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but like if ever there was a time to have Nikki on, like this is it, because I'm full blown deep into the conspiracy streets. Like I am of the impression that Biden died somewhere along the lines of Paul McCartney 30 years ago, and we have a clone here. I'm all in on the Trump faked his own assassination attempt situation. I'm just all in on the conspiracies right now.
I'm much more interested in what. Like, I don't think the assassination attempt was faked, but I also don't think it was real in the sense that his ear, like, is not fucked up.
He's Wolverine, man.
Right. If you got hit in the ear by a bullet, your ear would be fucked up. His ear is normal. So I don't think they have the fucking capability to fake an assassination attempt to that level of accuracy.
What do you mean? We faked the moon landing?
when I say they, I mean Trump and his people, because they're idiots. But like the thing about it for me is like, if he's not like, I thought it would be like, oh, his injured ear, and it would like never heal.
Yeah.
Because he was constantly trying to remind people of the fact that he got shot in the ear. But his ear is fine. Like, what the hell's going on?
Oh man, I cannot take any of this seriously. Like, not one bit of it. And I know that maybe this is like very anti-patriotic of me, but like I've lived long enough and through enough election cycles to just know that this one specifically is like the biggest meme that we've ever seen in our lifetime, and I'm just here for it. I'm completely here for it, and I'm just trying to figure out like where to pile my money in. With the betting lines moving, is it because of like have we acquired more polling data, or is it just more so that people are piling in on Kamala?
Kamala is 2 points ahead in the polls now, as of today. Like she's averaging a 2.1% lead in the polls.
Oh man, I just feel like this is just set up for a giant rug.
Just to go Trump.
I'm with you, man.
Well, for me, the best indication of things are changing is if you look at Trump himself and how he's behaving. He is like completely unhinged the last couple of days.
As opposed to?
He was trying to start a conspiracy theory that Biden was trying to get back in the race.
I'm trying to start a conspiracy theory that he's an alien and that Biden's dead.
Yeah, but thankfully you're not in charge of the betting markets.
That's true. Although
Trump himself is absolutely fucking panicking the last couple days.
I wonder how much of it has to do with him selecting JD Vance as a VP.
He knows he fucked up with that.
That just seems like it's really funny because I had no awareness around him outside of
couch memes.
No, that's all new to me. So I actually have the book Hillbilly Elegy, but I never read it. Jessica Wellman gave it to me as a present. She said you would really enjoy this, and I think the reason is because we grew up in very similar places.
Right, it's like it's your upbringing. It's Ohio. It's poor. It's
he actually was
close to you.
He spent the first portion of his life like actually near where Trump got assassinated, or where they took an attempt at his life. I believe it was like Slippery Rock area that he was initially going to elementary school, and then he ended up going to like Northwest Ohio, et cetera, et cetera. So like, yeah, same region, like same sort of like addiction filled childhood and all that other stuff. And I never read the book because like I just can't read, period. I need to listen to it. Like I'm an audio learner, and I just never bothered. But the movie came out, and I have to tell you, based off of now the like excerpts that are coming out of the book, like the couch fucking stuff.
That's not real, by the way. What's funny about it is there's nothing in the book about him fucking a couch. Someone on Twitter made a joke about like they posted as if they were like, oh, I can't believe there's a bit in the book about him fucking a couch. And there never was a bit in the book about that.
Oh,
everybody just ran with it, and now it's a meme that he fucks couches.
I knew it wasn't real in the sense that it didn't happen. I thought it was actually he made a joke in the book about fucking a couch.
There's nothing in the book about it.
Okay.
Someone on Twitter made a joke, like pretending that they read the book and they were like, oh shit, I can't believe he said this in the book.
Right.
And everyone just ran with it because it was funny.
Anyway, like as more excerpts are coming out from the book, and I found out that it was more of like his own personal twist on his like autobiography, I guess. I'm so glad I didn't read it, because what Ron Howard did with that story and like in telling the movie was fucking phenomenal.
Oh, I've heard from someone. I don't remember who it was. Someone didn't like the movie.
I thought the movie was fantastic.
Someone that I spoke to didn't like it.
I think I would greatly dislike the book because I despise this guy.
What's the movie called?
Hillbilly Elegy.
Okay.
It's actually on Netflix right now. The Netflix is so sharp. The second he became the VP, they just immediately bought it and put it up.
They know the algorithm tells them all. The algorithm tells them everything, you know?
That's who we should be electing.
The algorithm?
The fucking algorithm.
Give it 100 years. You know?
Yeah, maybe less.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, we might not be electing the algorithm. The algorithm might be our overlord within 100 years. You know, so.
We know that that's who's controlling Joe Biden right now.
The algorithm? Yeah. Not a very good algorithm if it's controlling Joe Biden.
We needed Nikki on today for sure.
Man, I'm so deep in the conspiracies, man. And the thing is like, they're not even intertwined, so it makes it so much worse. Like, I'm all the way down a rabbit hole of like, Biden's been dead for months. Like, that's why he had to pull out. But simultaneously down a rabbit hole of like, Trump was trying to raise his popularity and whatnot, and like the whole thing was staged. Like, that kid showed up in a BlackRock commercial before there was a ladder just leaned up against the goddamn building. Who knows what's going on?
The kid's
here?
not really dead. You know,
Right.
like-
I'm with
It was all Heinz 57.
I'm with Hunt on this one.
Go on.
Trump's out of his fucking mind. He's at a press conference a couple hours.
No, he's out of his
Hold on.
mind.
He's at a press conference a couple hours ago talking about who Kamala slept with when she was 30 years old.
Montel Williams.
No, it was Willie Brown, the mayor of San Fran.
Oh, the guy who was on crack. No. That was Baltimore. That was the Baltimore mayor.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's just like going off.
Bringing this full circle to baseball, there was a manager, Washington. Ron Washington.
Yeah,
big crackhead.
of the national
Functioning crackhead.
big crackhead.
Yeah.
That sounds like Ron Washington sounds like a made up name that someone would make up to make fun of Americans. Like, I'm Ron Washington.
Right. Especially if he ultimately became a functioning crackhead.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you have it. That's that should get us right into the poker talk
Right.
today.
We've done sports. We've done politics. You know, let's move on.
America.
So I don't know. I haven't had a chance to read this, but Guapo, I sent you the link. PokerOrg just put out an article. And the only reason I'm even bringing this up, not to rehash things, but I would like to get Hunt's opinion on this a little bit.
Sure.
I'm a little terrified by the title, and it's just Matt Berkey alleges cheating ring using new tech to steal millions. It's like, I don't want credit for this, man.
This is what you got to deal with when you have a daily podcast.
It's like,
you know?
I don't want this sort of smoke. Like, who knows what the hell is going on here?
Uzbekistan cheating ring overlords are going to be after you soon. The Uzbek mafia is going to be after you.
I mean, it extends much further, I believe. But did you hear much about what was going on with
I
all
did.
this?
I listened to most of the pod the other day when you were talking about it. It's pretty wild. Like, I was kind of surprised. Maybe this is just like a tournament player thing, but I was more surprised than anything else to hear that they'd even tried this in like 50K tournaments. I could just assume that like these private cash games would be targeted for this, but like to show up at WSOP and try this in a 50K seems like, number one, there's so much variance in tournaments, like you can't even really guarantee it's actually going to like pay off in the way that it would in cash, but also like it feels like with so much more attention on it, it seems more ambitious. So they got pretty brave if they really were trying this in the high rollers at the series.
I mean, is it even brave? What the fuck happens to them if they get caught?
That's
Nothing.
true.
It ends up being a slap on the wrist.
I just figured like, I don't know, maybe this is probably naive. I just figured gaming would be more all over a big tournament like that than they would be over a private cash game.
When it comes down to it, we figured out the only time gaming gets evolved.
What's that?
It's when they take their little toys to the pits and they win a couple dollars in baccarat and blackjack.
Yeah.
They win like $25. Then they come over and play a 50K and they're like, wait, that guy won $25 before. Let's take a look at it.
So they don't
He's
care
cheating.
about poker, I guess. Yeah, it's a pretty wild story, man. I think it's really it's the kind of thing that puts a lot of fear into people when you talk about like it's sort of a global ring of people that's doing this. That's like the sort of thing where you start to suspect like at any game above a certain stake, like could it be happening to me? I imagine there's a lot of people who are pretty worried about it.
Yeah, especially like the people involved aren't that important. You could just recycle. You just get somebody who looks like a recreational. That's not that hard to find.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking like an organized crime thing, like the names and faces are going to be pretty interchangeable.
Right.
It could be anybody. You don't even have to look like a recreational.
No, it does.
You get to play whaley. What do you mean?
It doesn't matter.
If you're coming in at low stakes, mid stakes, doesn't matter.
Yeah, but like you keep saying that, but like low stakes, mid stakes just isn't very enticing.
It's not enticing to the immediate eye, but look, over a long run, they're taking a lot of fucking money out of the pool. Like it's like getting a job that's paying them something, what, 30 to 40x they'll ever get paid in their life, probably?
No, definitely not. Like if you're doing this at like, let's say 510.
Let's
say 510, and let's say that you're able to make 3x the largest hourly possible in that game. So you're making like $300 an hour,
okay.
$350 an hour, whatever. That is then being divvied up between you, your partner, and the syndicate that you're working for. So it's like for every 10 hours that you play, you probably receive somewhere in the neighborhood of like 25% of that, which is now less than a 5-10 win rate to begin with, right? You're making like $85-$90 an hour. That's not bad, but it's not like worth criminal activity over.
I mean, if the group is from Uzbekistan,
Well,
it
maybe.
might be just worth,
There's expenses too. Like they have to fly all around the world. They got to put them up in hotels. Point is that like if you just have recreationals that have availability to get in private games, that's just a way bigger hit. Like the guys over the course of the summer probably took somewhere in the mid 7 figures.
Yeah.
So it's like their hourly was probably like $5,000 to $10,000. Now, when you divvy that up, that's not so bad. Even if you're only getting like 15% of that, like you're still doing pretty fucking well, making $1,500 an hour.
Yeah, of course.
I think the thing that surprises me about the fact that it was done in these tournaments is that like if you're gonna actually make substantial money from these tournaments, you got a final table it or win it. And if you got a final table or win a 50K, you got to be on a stream. Like, are they gonna like cheat up until the final table or up until the stream?
No,
starts?
they'll cheat the stream.
Right, but like at a certain point, if you're cheating on a stream, the entire poker community is going to see every hand you're playing. Like, that's a risk. That's a significant risk.
Don't worry, we've never seen anybody cheat on stream before.
Yeah, of course, but
It's definitely a risk. But the problem is people will be so quick to dismiss a whale whaling it up.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah, I guess I think I'm underestimating how brazen people can be when they're trying to like break the law and rob people from.
Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Like you're absolutely correct that the dumbest approach would be to play tournaments. You don't get to guarantee yourself the 1, 2, or 3 seat.
I just assumed play a private cash game where there's never going to be a whole card camera.
Right. I think the difference is that like you can get a quick smash and grab if you're able to rip off like a 50K or something along those lines.
Yeah.
You're able to win 20 or 100 buy-ins, or maybe a little bit less, like 75 buy-ins.
And maybe
like
you
that.
get a bracelet out of it as well.
That'd be wild.
Just like cheat to win a bracelet and just
How many bracelets do you think were a byproduct of cheating?
Oh shit! Wow, I don't know. How many bracelets have there ever been awarded?
Thousands.
1,000? Yeah, like Jesus, I don't know. I would imagine the number, or I would hope the number has decreased over time.
Yeah,
but
I think that's true.
I would bet that if there was some way to figure it out, I think if you look like the 90s and earlier, there's probably a bunch of people who
I bet it was like 10%.
Yeah, it could have
over
been.
that time frame.
Like, if you include every form of cheating from marking cards through to everything you can imagine back then.
Collusion,
yeah.
Chip dumping, yeah.
Honestly, collusion is probably the biggest one, honestly.
How many does Min have?
I don't think any, but he probably got close a lot.
I was gonna say, because if he has any, we can guarantee
those.
Like how often do you think it was like two people get heads up and a guy's like, I'll give you X amount of first place money. We'll chop and I'll give you whatever if you just like fold and let me just dump or fold and let me win.
Yeah, you're right. That's soft cheating. I wouldn't think that much about it unless there were like side bets that they were cheating on.
Yeah, I just mean like if you're talking bracelets that were not fairly won,
right?
There's gonna be a lot.
Yeah,
we see it in other events. Like we've seen, wasn't there? Who was it? Was it Mike Lear? There was a deal made where it was like they were heads up in something and he wanted the trophy, so they did a deal where it was like he gets to be called the winner and somebody else gets the money or something.
There was grumblings about this happening in the circuit. Rings,
like dealing for rings, chopping and just giving
just
the
like
ring,
chopping six ways, just get the ring,
right? Like
shit like
one
that.
person's like, I want the ring. I do feel like if you chop before you win, or if there's some kind of deal that involves you being given the win as part of a deal, it's like it takes something away from it.
Should be like an asterisk next to it.
Yeah.
So there's been at least 7 bracelets cheated.
Because that's how many men.
That's how many men the motherfucking master has.
He has 7.
He has 7 bracelets and 4 rings, 134 cashes for $4.2 million.
Wow. Well, there you have it. It's at least 7.
Does Men the Master have more cashes? Like you probably have more than 4.2 million, right?
In
Lifetime cashes.
Not at the World Series.
Oh, he has 4.2 just at World Series.
Yeah.
How much does he have total? Can you look that up?
Yeah, hold on.
We'll give you a second.
I think at World Series I have like around 2.
Right, but like I mean, it would have been. It's wild to me that like Men has probably cheated his way to like God knows how many million in cashes.
How many do you think?
I think it's like 6.
Total, I would say 6 or 7. Yeah, if he's got 4.2 at WSOP, I would say 6 or 7.
He's laughing at both of you.
He's 11.
He has 11, with his best cash being $412,000.
He has 11 million in cashes.
11.2 million.
Oh my God.
That's why. That means at one point in his career he was probably in the top 10.
Where is he on the
earnings.
all-time money list? He's got to be probably top 200?
He is in the United States number 60. In California, he's number 6.
What about globally?
All-time money. All-time money. Let's go right. 126.
It's wild.
That's crazy.
What's also wild is that he won't be in the top 500 10 years from now.
Yeah, that's true. He won't be.
I mean, it's pretty crazy to think like how much the MTT world is expanding at the top.
It really is. I mean, Bonomo's still top, right? Or is it Bryn now still?
I think it's
Bonomo and Bryn have been like swapping for a couple of years.
Yeah. I think D-Negs has fallen all the way to 5th.
Yeah.
All-time money list.
Stevie's still up there.
Bryn's up there. He's number 1, 2 million above Bonomo.
2 million above Bonomo.
Yeah, Stevie's 6 off or 7 off.
What a stark comparison between Bryn and Bonomo. It's just like,
I know, two sides of a different, two
just
sides
so
of a coin, you know?
so insane. I mean, like Bryn just like won every fucking big one-off event.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, oh, $1 million buy-in, you say? Yeah, I'll win the biggest one of those ever.
Right.
Why not? 26 million. Ship it I mean, think of that. That's fucking like half of his lifetime earnings is his biggest score.
You know what's crazy is Stevie final tabled that. Stevie got like 6th or something for 4 million, I think.
Yeah.
If Stevie wins that, he would be 20 million ahead of anybody on the all-time money list.
Well, same thing with Dan Smith. He got like 2nd or 3rd, I think.
Imagine that. Imagine if Stevie's like, instead of being 3rd or whatever, we're like, oh yeah, Stevie's got 20 million more than anybody else from lifetime.
It's
like,
also insane.
It's crazy.
Dan Smith's at
Absolutely
55 million, so he would have been right there.
Yeah, Dan's a goat.
Yeah, Men the Masters fucking player bio just says, I rob you. Number 1, escape from South Vietnam in 1978. Number 2, finance the building of 2 schools in Vietnam. Number 3, owned a furniture store and dry cleaners. He just says, I've got this money dirty.
That's true.
Honestly,
those just sound like good laundering.
I'm just watching this shit.
if he wasn't such a scumbag, I would say they should make a movie out of his story, because escaping from Vietnam and going on to become a successful poker player sounds like it could be a,
I mean, they could just do the same thing for Scotty Wynn. He didn't cheat.
I was gonna say the same.
That's true.
Or at least not that we
I didn't
know
realize Scotty actually was like an escape from Vietnam kind of
think
story
so.
as well.
Yeah,
That's
pretty
cool.
sure.
Wow.
Man, what a list.
Yeah.
It's wild. So young too.
So yeah, cheating rings. Yeah, this is a big story that I imagine is probably going to run for a little while, I would guess.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. Honestly, like I think the biggest thing to come of this is, from everything that I noticed, the vast majority of these have kind of like come to completion.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's wild how many text messages I got just even after that one show. Huss reached out to me from Australia. He said that they caught 2 guys from Uzbekistan cheating their game, and they called him out for it like in the middle of the game.
Wow.
And the guys just laughed at him. It's like they're just so brazen about it that they don't give a fuck. Like, okay, well, catch us. And it was kind of the same thing this summer, like when we caught a guy who just basically called us a bunch of pussies for not wanting to play with him.
Yeah, I heard that story. That was
I mean, they're just in
wild
protected
story.
environments, probably.
Yeah.
Like, whether it's a casino.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, what are you going to do? We have no concrete proof. And even if we did, who the fuck is going to police it?
Nobody gives a fuck.
Right. Like, if we turn it into gaming, like, they're long gone.
Yeah.
You know, what's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to get banned from MGM properties.
The game that's in Australia, the Huss is probably running, is probably a private game. There's no,
For sure,
no weapons,
100%.
no nothing. Everybody's just like, whatever, you going to do? You want to fight? I brought a gun with me.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a scary world out there.
It is.
Be safe.
It's actually kind of wild calling it out mid-play. Like, that's scary because, like, when somebody's cheating, they also come with the thought that they might get caught today. And if they come with the thought that they might get caught today, they bring something with them. They have a backup plan to get out of that situation.
You know what's crazy for me from a perspective of thinking about the was it the 250K where everybody was talking about Martin Cabral and the controversy?
Yeah.
Like, I remember hearing some conversations at that time where people were talking about hands they'd been in against him. I think it might have been Chance or Dan Smith or somebody, where they were like, well, there's a certain percentage chance he's cheating. And if he's cheating, his range is this. If he's not cheating, his range is this. Mm-hmm. And I have to try to make a river decision based on a certain probability that my opponent is cheating. Like, how are you supposed to navigate that? That's crazy.
Yeah. It's
wild.
It's a real mindfuck, to say the least. All right. Well, let's pivot off of a little bit of darkness and despair and get into a little bit of strat chat. So,
Indeed.
What we basically cooked up for today is coming up with basic templates for how to approach study. both efficiently and I guess from scratch. Like a lot of the conversations that I've been finding myself in more and more lately, that is both leaving me a bit frustrated with the coaching space as a whole, but also like maybe reinvigorating me as a player and realizing just how wide the gap is between those that are capable of learning and executing versus those who are only capable of one, the other, or neither. It's an interesting place to be, basically. But what I'm ultimately getting to is that I think when you talk about poker study, to some it's very obvious the approach that needs to be taken and what you're hoping to get out of it. And I think to others it's like this big great mystery. But what is pretty consistent in between is that depending on how you enter the arena, i.e. playing to begin with, like whatever your first introduction is, you're going to get fed starkly different information. If you come from the live realm, a lot of the simple heuristics that other live players will pass on to you or that you'll develop for yourself based off of observational bias and just playing hands to completion will be pretty much dead wrong from a math standpoint. Contrary to that, if you just get thrown into an online pool where you're kind of introduced to a solver right out of the gate and you're forced to basically build a model of thinking around what the solver does and how to most properly execute that, you probably just like are a little bit too nuanced in the approach and get bogged down by a lot of white noise, get overwhelmed by a lot of micro decisions, and just miss the obvious, especially if you're in soft games, which is that people are just wildly imbalanced, and it doesn't really serve you all that well to ignore that and just stay the course. So I guess the thesis here, or the leading question, is how do we translate where we are now to people who are kind of just like dipping their toes in the water and don't really have a great understanding of what theory is or looks like in a data sense?
Interesting question. I mean, the reason why this topic came to mind for me was because with all the tools that are coming out recently, I'm fielding a lot of questions from people about like, how do I actually use this? How do I actually incorporate this into something that I'm studying? And I think that the different starting points that people arrive with, it leads everybody to naturally have a different way of trying to learn the game. And most of the time, when we're trying to learn something new, we approach it through the same lens as something that we have already learned, right? So we learn it through the same patterns. If we are, for example, like really good at a certain thing, we have a certain talent that we have developed over a period of years, or we're an expert in a certain field, we apply that same process to poker for the most part. We start to think in terms of like, well, I can understand this better if I compare it to this, right? Something that I already know. So I think that there's a natural tendency for people to approach poker in that way. And as a coach, I always find it useful to lean into that. But the problem is, depending on what that field actually is, you're going to be dealing with people with vastly different backgrounds. And sometimes it's somebody who comes from a perspective that whatever skill they have is something that is it's not very cognitive. It's very physical, right? So if you're an expert, if you're like an athlete or a musician, it's something that requires muscle memory. It's something that requires using your body to do something, and your brain and the way you express a concept and your logical brain is not always going to be used by that skill. So you have to try to find ways of learning poker in the same way that you learned, whatever else it is that you're good at. But by contrast, if you look at, someone coming into poker who's learned a skill that is very cognitive, I had the benefit of having come to poker having learned languages and things like that, which is, of course, it's like purely cognitive. You come at it from a perspective of recognizing that everything that needs to change, all the learning that needs to take place is only going to happen mentally, right? There's not going to be any physical element to it. You can't add anything other than just a purely mental element. So I think that the different starting points that people have, the different processes that we implement, I think we all come at it from whatever is familiar to us. And some people start with an advantage in that regard, and some people start with a big disadvantage. But it's hard to reconcile it without being able to say to each individual person, and in my case, to say to individual students, well, you're familiar with this methodology of learning, therefore that most likely is going to work best for you, and we have to try to find a way of looking at the game through that lens. I think it's really difficult if you ever try to say to people, there is one way to learn poker and this is how it works, right? Because it just isn't that way when you're dealing with something purely cognitive. You can't say that about learning a language. You can't say that about, all sorts of other things like learning a particular field that, you have to study in college or something like that. Like, you can't just say like there's one singular way that this works. So I think it's different for poker than it is for a lot of other disciplines.
Yeah, I think the biggest struggle is that there's no natural order of things when it comes to teaching fundamentals, because there's so much dependency on pretty much all strategic decisions that you make. There are a myriad of things at play every single time that you're put into any one decision point, or if you want to think of it from the sim standpoint, any one particular node. And I've gotten into like a lot of very frustrating conversations where basically we're doing our best to try to translate math into English, and people who are much further along the path that don't recognize where they came from will default to terms that are meaningless to somebody who isn't very well studied yet, right? Like if you're talking, and I mean, I'm very guilty of this too. I do it all the time when we're doing like in the muck and stuff. But if you're looking at like, a particular spot and it's like, at some frequency you have to continue with all your zero EV hands. It's just like, that doesn't mean fucking anything to somebody who doesn't understand EV. Like if you just take someone who's never looked at a solve and you give them that sentence, it's like, okay, how do you determine what hands are zero EV? Right? Like that's the natural follow-up question. And there's no good answer other than run it. Right? It's like we have some conceptual understanding because we understand range interplay and how that works with board textures and things of that nature. Like we can look at a particular board and recognize that a particular hand is low in equity, and if it's incentivized to continue, it's because it has some other upside to it, whether it's a draw to the nuts, potential future street bluff that we can retain in our range, just a myriad of other intricate details. But there's no way to summarize that to a newer person who's like has no vision over a complete strategy. And there's also no like easy step-by-step process to get them to having like a rough vision over a complete strategy. And I think that's why, on one hand, the game remains very beatable and will continue to be so for the near future as far as I'm concerned. This is why like I've very much shifted my stance and I'm very pro tool, because I don't think that it's hindering the game the way people believe it to. A lot of players that were big winners for long periods of time either do adjust or don't adjust, but most of it is just like mimicking behavior. And this is the conversation we were having with Guapo the other day, where he mimicked a good strategy, but had no rhyme or reason for why he was doing it. It's like, well, why are you choosing to overbet on ace king deuce? And it's like, well, because that's what the strategy for that board is. It's like, yeah, it is, but not for everything. Like you can't just do it with range on every street, right? So we have to figure out ways to now like break that strategy down into components of what drives the bet, what drives a check, how do these hands like particularly rank in different classes, what are their incentives, all these things. There's just no simple way to communicate that. It's just like a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of pinpointing a single mistake and extrapolating out other points on that mistake. And it makes it almost impossible to be a lone wolf, I think, and teach yourself this, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're just incredibly studious with the tools.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think for several years now, I've basically been of the belief that the fastest pathway to get really good at poker is to spend as much time as you can talking about poker with other people.
Yeah.
Like just to get on a Discord server, get a bunch of people around you that you can talk about hands with. And if you were to look, I think, at the elite poker players on the planet, I don't think there's likely to be a single one of them who hasn't developed a habit of just talking about poker constantly with people, like just talking about hands, like posting spots, running spots for themselves. Like there's nobody that is just a lone wolf that has just learned from a solver, and at no point have they ever had like any kind of group of people that they studied with and they just got really good just from interacting with the solver themselves. Like if you're not discussing hands, bouncing ideas back and forth, then the pathways in your brain, the neural pathways, are not going to be firing in a way that allows you to make decisions using the information that you're actually taking in. If you just watch videos and try to play good, it's not going to get you there. It can get you somewhere, but it can't get you to where you want to go. And that immersion in a poker frame of mind, that immersion in the thought process of making a decision is, to me at least, it's the most important thing.
So let me ask you then, as somebody who like creates a ton of training material throughout the course of a year, somebody who's doing a lot of one-on-one coaching, basically is an educator in the space, how then do you approach this aspect of offering a guideline to study for students both individually and in mass? Because those are two very different things, right? It's very easy to get somebody one-on-one and create a path for them.
Sure.
But when you're tasked with creating general knowledge for anybody who's willing to consume, that template seems a lot less clear to me.
Yeah, I think that this is the point where you have to differentiate the idea of building a skill set from acquiring knowledge, right? Because acquiring knowledge is the kind of thing that you can get from reading a book, from watching a video. You can be informed about a concept in the same way that you go to college and you get lectured at by a professor that tells you this is what a certain concept means, and then you go away and like write papers on it, and you start to understand it in a bit more depth. But you have that starting point of there is knowledge that you're going to need to have, but you also have to, when you take in that knowledge, you recognize that the knowledge is not the skill, and the skill itself comes from the ability to actually be in the moment of playing a hand and take in information, use the knowledge that you have to turn that into a decision that is better than the one you would have made without that knowledge. And so I think that there's a lot of people who get caught up trying to take in as much knowledge as they can, and they stagnate because they never put any energy into how to actually implement that knowledge in a more productive way. They never post hands anywhere to get feedback from people. They never have discussions with people to see like, what do other players think about this kind of spot? Like, what are the tendencies that people think that the average player is going to have in this situation? What variables am I not considering? So I think you have to start from the perspective of, if you are coaching a larger group of people, if you are building content that is designed to educate people in a group setting, for example. Like I just did a GTO Wizard coaching session yesterday that Conrad was at. Your job is to deliver knowledge, but if you're a one-to-one coach, your job is to help them build a skill set, and your part of that is to provide them or help them to find methodologies that allow them to take that knowledge that you've given them and the knowledge that they're picking up from other avenues, tournaments they're watching or whatever else, and take that into a skill set. So that, to me, is the difference between how I approach making content versus coaching one-to-one. It's, am I delivering knowledge, or am I mentoring someone to build a skill set over time,
Yeah, I think that's a really great framework to operate from. And I think that if we were to look at it through the consumer's eyes, I don't think that there's a differentiation. And I think that becomes a bit of an issue. It's why I'm like, as much as I hate to say it because I own a training company, I'm not very bullish on the training space as it exists. Like, I don't know that there's a ton of, well, let me rephrase. There is a ton of upside, obviously, creating the content because there are consumers. And as long as there's consumers, people will hand over money and, you'll get what you get out of it. But I see it flatlining the same way I saw the fitness industry kind of flatline in the last 5 to 10 years. once a lot of once the veil was kind of lifted. I think for a long time throughout the 70s and 80s, maybe even into the 90s and things of that nature, number one, people were naive and didn't realize that the bodybuilders that we're seeing on the cover of every magazine were just using steroids. And number two, outside of that, I think that they believed that there was like some secret element to getting into shape when it came to diet, nutrition, the way that you weight train, a lot of reinventing the wheel, and everybody had their own spin on it, right? But eventually the veil got lifted. A lot of knowledge was passed on through documentaries, through podcasts, through specialists who were willing to tackle these topics. And I think just the general population when it comes to health and wellness is the bar has been raised a lot by comparison to 20 or 30 years ago. Same holds true to poker, in my opinion. I think 10 years ago, everything was like shrouded in mystery. And the winners, we didn't know how they were winning. We just recognized that they were winning and that they were probably pretty good. So we would take their anecdotal advice as knowledge. And we would consume it, and then we would try to replicate it. And that's kind of the disconnect, right? When you're just consuming a bunch of different sources, trying to increase your knowledge base, and then having no capacity whatsoever to translate that into skill, you just often are left devoid of any improvement, a lot of plateauing, a lot of frustration. And I think that that's probably the area that the space is most lacking in, because I think you're correct. I think if you're creating content for a site, or even as an individual who's putting it out on their own YouTube or just for fun, your sole goal is just like writing a book. Like you want to pack in as much knowledge as you possibly can, even if it's just general knowledge, for your viewer to consume. But the problem is they think they're consuming a skill set, or they think they're building a skill set by consuming it.
Absolutely.
And I wonder if there's an angle to take. I wonder if there's a better approach that can scale what happens at a one-on-one level.
I think that the answer to that, I think, lies in delivering knowledge about how to build the skill set, right? Which is what I try to do to people every time I get the chance to talk to them one-to-one. And I do try to kind of impart this when I get the chance to talk about it in group settings. And this is why every time we do the academy, I always say, like, talk to each other, like build a study group, all these sorts of things. But I think the issue is that because building a skill set and that kind of execution over time is a process that it hinges a lot on how much time someone's willing to dedicate to poker, what kind of network they already have, what kind of methodologies they want to use for building the knowledge, what they like, what they don't like in terms of how they study. There's a lot of individualized elements to the process of, how is that building the skill set going to look for each person? That giving someone the knowledge that, building a skill set in poker comes from a lot of hard work over time, a lot of communication, a lot of work with sims and like all this stuff. There's only so far you can actually go with that, right? To a larger audience. And it ultimately ends up boiling down to the same thing that something like the fitness industry would, which is that there are no shortcuts. And you acquire the knowledge that you need to acquire, and then you put in a lot of work. And I think that the difficult thing about poker is that people look at it, because it's a mental sport, so to speak, because it's something that you do in your brain. People think that once you have the knowledge, it means you have the skill set.
Right.
And that's not true.
Right.
No one would ever make the assumption that if you watched a bunch of videos about Tiger Woods playing golf, you suddenly can play golf like Tiger Woods. But for whatever reason, people make the assumption that if you watch 1,000 videos by high-level poker players, you suddenly will know how to implement strategies in the way that they do. And it just isn't how it works. I don't know how we overcome that hurdle.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt,
That's
but
okay.
I think it's because they're watching with the purpose of answer seeking.
Yeah.
And they believe that what's being conveyed to them are answers to the problems that plague them, where that's not entirely, I mean, it's partially true, but it's more so that they are putting together a 10,000 piece puzzle, and every bit of content they consume is maybe a new puzzle piece.
Right.
So they're able to start to get a little bit clearer of a vision, perhaps, but the actual executables, the actual call to action, so to speak, aren't very clear at all. And definitely can go the other route where it becomes very convoluted, compared to what you previously knew. Because some things will contradict what you've been learning in the past or what you've actually been doing to execute in the past. And it's not that the contradiction is wrong. It's that the contradiction is harmful now without greater context of why it's a better choice.
Yeah,
I think there's a quick parallel to what you guys are talking about when Matt was talking about watching videos and assuming that you can just now play like Tiger Woods, and what you were just talking about, Matt. Yesterday, I remember having a conversation with you here at the studio, and you asked me if I ever look at my opponent's response when I'm running a solve, and it's no. I just run it because I want to know if I played the hand correctly. So just to kind of reinforce what you guys were talking about, there is some truth to that.
I think, yeah, and I think that's a common hurdle that it's tough to get over, because for the most part, a lot of our learning is experiential, and quite often we become aware of something that we think might be a mistake, or we become aware of what might be a problem based on the fact that we played a hand in a certain way, it went badly, and we now want to go back and reconsider maybe we should have done it differently, right? And I think the reason why, as a coach, I've never really been that big of a believer in looking at hand histories and evaluating, how you played a hand in the past, is because we're so prone to making evaluations about what we need to study in the future based on individual events that took place in the past. And it may be that a player made a mistake in a certain spot because they misunderstand a certain concept, but quite often, if you look back and you say, oh, I should have folded this river, just knowing that you should have folded that river doesn't actually teach you why you should have folded that river. And all it's really going to do is probably lead you to fold other rivers in situations where maybe you shouldn't actually fold, but you're kind of mimicking the opposite of what the mistake was. And now you're just falling into the opposite trap. You know what I mean? So it's definitely really tough when you're looking back at hands that are painful to look at, hands you lost, things like that. I think it can really be a trap for a lot of students.
Yeah. I'm really reconsidering a lot of things, and, being almost 8 years into the training space, there's just like a big part of me that feels compelled to start from scratch. Like, take a 6-month hiatus, freeze everything, come back, and just really forget about the guy who's capable of using a solver. Right? Like, just forget about everybody who's already to the point of being somewhat self-taught, and instead just create content for the person that is a hobbyist, the person that takes poker seriously, but just truly feels overwhelmed and lost by almost all of it. Because that, to me, is the most fascinating part, is the connecting of the dots. And it's the part during my career that, like, we just didn't have, right? It took years to be able to fully even get a glimpse of what equity meant, of what EV meant, all those things. And now it's just assumed that if you've been dealt in, you have, like, it's a prereq that you just know what EV is.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about how somebody would go about that, trying to sort of set up a training site that was aimed at people that are not looking to consume content using solvers, because I think the understanding that we have of where the poker market is now is that we know that so much of the content that seems to succeed the most in the coaching space is solver based. And I don't know if there's other than Jonathan Little's content and the stuff that Poker Coaching puts out, I don't know that there's a great precedent for what a sort of approach like that would look like in today's day and age, because I almost feel like even anybody who starts out saying, I don't feel comfortable using a solver, I feel like it's rare that people say, well, I don't want to ever use a solver. I feel like people say, I'm not ready to do it. Mm-hmm. But they look at it from like, well, maybe a year from now I will be ready, right? So it's like, it's hard for me.
I kind of feel like that's the lie they're being sold, though, right? Like
it could be, but I just mean it's for me as a coach, like, I feel like the type of people that want that kind of content are the people that are I almost feel like they're like pre-signing up for a training site. It's like hard to know what that demographic of people is that signs up for a training site but doesn't want to go that deep into it.
Well, I would argue that that's the vast majority of paying customers. And I think
because they're trying to pay for a fix almost.
Exactly. exactly.
yeah.
It's
I could see
It's
that.
almost like, hey, let me give you money, you give me the answers, and
Correct.
then we can get down the road.
it's the fat guy who shows up and pays an exorbitant amount for a trainer and then like doesn't want to go to the gym.
So
What are you talking about landing like that for, man?
I suppose the question becomes like, is there any resolution for that at all though? Because if someone signs up looking for a quick fix, and then the first thing they get told is like, it takes a long time to learn how to get good at this game, what are you going to do for them?
I don't even know that you need to tell them that, right? Like, I think it's more just like spoon feeding them along the way. Like, if I were tasked with, let's say that there's a problem in the fitness industry where like overweight people, their retention is way too low once they sign up for the gym, right?
Mm-hmm.
The easy problem to tackle there is like, how can we make the retention higher? And you need to find like the pressure point, like what's causing the retention to be low. I would suspect some of it is a lack of motivation, of course, but the big aspect of it is just like early failure, right? Like just immediately being overwhelmed or feeling too sore or whatever the case may be, like just being onboarded too quickly to something that's new and scary and strenuous, that it becomes easier to quit than to stay. Like, I don't think you want to sort for resilience at that level. And I think the same becomes true for poker, where training sites actually could become a big net positive to the space by lowering the barrier of entry and lowering the level of resilience necessary in order to start to acquire knowledge. Because from my vantage point, and this doesn't just apply to us, I think this applies like across the board. The people that are consuming Run It Once, the people that are consuming Raise Your Edge, are us, Upswing, like all of the major sites, I think the vast majority of people paying are different than the vast majority of people consuming. So I think that there's like a small collective of people that are watching a Phil Galfond video and taking a lot out of it and getting better. But the majority of people who will learn something from Phil's video will just never buy a Run It Once subscription because they're close to being his peer, right? Maybe they're not actually on the same level, but you know, they're coming up and they'll learn it on their own eventually, either through their peer group or through self-discovery, whatever the case may be. Point is, they don't need their hand held through running sims, through thinking about spots, etc. It's just nice to hear Phil's thoughts once in a while because he might illuminate something that you may not have previously thought about. So it might fast track you. And that's the majority of the content that's being created, is towards that group that's already like pretty well established when it comes to understanding the intricacies of the game, understanding C-bet strategies, understanding like EV equities, like what drives these strategies, the core base knowledge, right? The vast majority of people paying, kind of as Conrad mentioned, are people who are just like, I love poker, I want to be better, I have no idea where to start with this, so I look up to person X, Y, or Z, I'm going to hand over money and have them teach me. And the problem is we hit them with a fire hose.
Well, isn't this what Jonathan Little does though?
I'm not so sure. I think I think to some degree, yes. And I think that's why he captures the market better than most.
I think it's what it is, his messaging. I think his messaging is what captures them, and then maybe he
but like
does.
his coaching roster doesn't. If you watch a Matt Affleck video and you are brand new to tournaments, you're not doing anything but getting overwhelmed. Matt's very good, and he's teaching to the aggregate.
Yeah, I just mean like I'm trying to separate out in my mind like what you're suggesting from somebody should just copy Jonathan Little, right? Because
it's basically copying Jonathan's messaging, like, and making training content like in that type of sense.
that appeals to people like that.
Not specifically just that. I don't think you need to dilute so far that you become inauthentic. But what I'm saying is that like, what I'm more so saying is that I think Jonathan's site is set up to onboard these beginners, and then the ones that don't fall off progress. Yeah. Right. I'm actually saying like you just create the net and don't worry about the progression, because I think once people get to a certain point, the only reason they remain loyal to a site is to just like pay it forward.
So I guess what you're suggesting is sort of a site where you sort of accept that people who progress to a certain point will no longer get anything out of what you're making. Like,
yes,
you're kind of saying like, once they get to the point where they could handle using a solver, they're sort of graduating away from the site.
Yeah, and I mean, from a business perspective, that makes a lot of sense because your two main targets are going to be acquisition and retention, right? And if you are constantly building content on top of one another, like we've been doing for years, you hit the retention mark, but you lose the acquisition because nobody's going to start at the beginning. No one's going to go back and watch a video from 2018.
Yeah.
And nor should they because it's probably going to be a little bit outdated.
Yeah.
But you're also not going to recreate the content from 2018. So what ends up happening is your audience continually progresses with you, but due to churn, you're going to naturally lose some along the way. And it's going to become more and more challenging to acquire new users because now all of a sudden we're talking about like, post-flop ICM with PKOs and 10% of the field remaining. And it's like a newbie just opened this up and was like, I just want to know what hands to open under the gun.
Yeah. Honestly, I think one of the biggest things that Jonathan Little has going for him here is the fact that his site is just called pokercoaching.com.
That helps. That definitely helps.
Truthfully, like, if we were going to do this whole like start from scratch thing, we need a different name because I feel like the sort of the demographic that we're talking about here doesn't really get the Solve for Why name as a like this is an entry level kind of a thing.
Yeah, but I think in like 2024, it's not like people were keying in the URL. You know what I mean? Like they'll just search Matt Hunt coaching and it'll pop up. Or
this is kind of at the point where like I don't really know where our customers come from. I don't have the marketing info and you do, so I would defer to you on that one for sure.
Yeah, I mean you're not wrong that like having a URL like that is like very easy SEO.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful. And for sure, like our SEO score sucks, but it's also because we don't put we just use organic, so we don't put any effort into that. But like the other sites aren't losing anything because of their names.
Sure. I just mean if you were to create the blueprint for if there was nobody already in the market and you were going to create like where we want the most basic onboarding platform for people who are just trying to start out learning poker, like other than maybe like learnpoker.com or something like that, like pokercoaching.com is a pretty clear and simple sort of starting point,
Yeah. It becomes, that's a secondary game though, right? Like Doug is a good example of somebody who he himself may not be, but like someone on his team is like incredible at SEO. So they just like own the front page search of like the vast majority of his competitors. So like if you search Solve for Why, Upswing comes up.
Yeah. I've seen that.
And it's not just us, like it's a lot of his major competitors. So yeah, naming matters a little bit, but it really comes down to being able to like play the algorithm, all the other stuff. This is all an aside from
maybe the whole start fresh kind of thing is maybe it is does just come down to like you got to do good SEO, you got to do like all the you got to tick all the boxes. You know?
For businesses to succeed, like it really does. It's not about the product at all. Like almost none of it is about the product, and that's kind of the point that I'm making. Is I feel like the training community as a whole is drastically underserving the needs of the people that are hungriest to learn, and I think a lot of that is based off of wanting to be considered credible by your peers.
Yeah, I mean, my guess as to why that's the case would be that almost, and we kind of talked about this in group chat the other day, like every training site is owned or largely operated by someone who was a poker player first and started a training site, including ours, right? And there's nobody out there who has just said, you could maybe make the argument that BBZ is like doesn't really play very much, but I don't know how much he plays.
But they did.
He did, exactly. That's the whole
Jordan
point. That's
was
the whole thing. Like,
Jordan was an elite high stakes player.
Of course, yeah. So like you could maybe make the argument that he doesn't really play now, but he started as a player and he's now known as a great coach. But like there's no site out there that I can think of that was just somebody that was run by someone who was an educator or wasn't a poker player. And it's because there's still this perception in the industry that the best people to learn from are the best players.
Right.
And I hope over time that is going to erode as we start to get to the point where
I think GTO Wizard really bucks that trend.
I think it does, and I am glad to be on board with them as a result of that, because I think there's a lot of coaches on the Wizard roster who are fantastic who don't have a great playing profile. But yeah, I hope this continues now that we have knowledge that we can transmit, that we can back up using solvers, that you can say this is actually objectively true about poker. You don't have to rely on someone who has succeeded over time telling you this is what you should do. You don't have to just trust that the way they do it is the right way. You can actually see now this is knowledge that we're going to impart to you, and it doesn't require a professional player to tell you that. But we're still at this point where the sites that get a lot of traffic, like if someone right now, someone who's like the biggest name player or whatever, just started a training site, instantly they would just they'd get a lot of traffic right away, right? Like if someone who was just, I don't know. I mean, when Fedor started Poker Code, it was instant. I know they're not at the top of the market now, but
right.
he had an instant boost because everyone wanted to learn from Fedor, and it's just it's kind of a trend.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a problem that plagues me because I think for me personally, when I got into the space, it was because I saw a massive hole not being fulfilled, which was addressing the live player's plight. And for the most part, there's a huge disconnect between the person who learned strict theory and plays only online versus other players that are mostly playing strictly theory based, compared to people who go play live and just see shit that just makes no goddamn sense, right? And that's not to say that theory doesn't apply. It's just more so that there are a lot of added layers, or at least different types of communication necessary to teach these players. Mm-hmm. And that was all I really wanted to succeed at, was helping along the live collective. Somewhere along the lines, the onus to shift into more of a hybrid that covers all the general theory bases felt more important, right? The wider the net you cast, the more important it is that you're not niche. And now I'm full circle where I just still see the same problem.
Maybe you need to just go meditate in Big Bear for a couple of weeks and come back and make a
If
plan.
I go to Big Bear, I'm just never coming back.
I might be going to Big Bear soon, actually. I know you guys have been so many times. I keep wanting to go myself.
It's a great place. Yeah, it's a great little getaway.
Heard a lot about it.
But yeah, I see full circle, a lot of the disconnect just still existing. And if you're starting your live career today, let's say you got 100 hours at 1-2 no limit in a casino, and that's your only exposure to poker, you're kind of fucked if you just log into any of the training sites. They're not going to be helpful. They're if anything, they're going to be harmful, because they're going to challenge a lot of what you know is working, or at least what you believe is working. And I think the issue with having those thoughts challenged is that they're challenged without real answers, and your thoughts initially aren't really all that wrong. A lot of the things that do work live for a reason. It just requires a greater scope to full circle understand what's supposed to work and why this works.
Yeah, here's a hot take that I don't know how accurate this is, but I would suspect that YouTube has a lot to do with making these trends hard to identify, because I would imagine you could probably learn what you need to learn to beat 1-2 or to not lose at 1-2 through YouTube.
Yeah.
Without signing up for a training site.
Yeah.
And therefore, I wonder if maybe what's happening is YouTube just captures all the people who aren't at the point of paying for a training site, and YouTube channels that put out this good info are actually more likely to attract this demographic than an overall training site.
It's possible, but again, with a skilled eye, which you obviously have, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a YouTube channel where you're this is too basic for me.
I don't even watch enough poker YouTube to really know, to be honest. But yeah, that's part of why I...
if you go down the rabbit hole, you're mostly going to see Sims.
On YouTube, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm thinking more of the clickbaity stuff of five things you shouldn't do at 1-2 and shit like that. That's always... That pops up in my feed sometimes.
Yeah.
I feel like there's vloggers putting out educational stuff, and there's just a million poker content creators on YouTube now.
That's true. That part's definitely true.
I wouldn't claim to be an expert on the space at all, but it would shock me if you can't, at a bare minimum, get decently good at poker just using YouTube.
Yeah. I think that's true too. Again, though, it's like you have to filter through a fuck ton of white noise.
I'm sure you do, but it's free. So
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, that's very true.
Free 99 is a attractive price.
Free is pretty attractive. Well, I don't know that we necessarily solved anything.
I don't think we did, but the idea of just taking 6 months off and starting afresh is one you haven't talked about before. So I'm curious if that ends up happening.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I play around with a lot of ideas, but I do like the biggest takeaway to kind of just wrap here. I do like the notion of understanding the difference between knowledge seeking and skill seeking, understanding the motivation of the source very differently. Like when somebody is speaking to a general collective, they're just trying to pass on general knowledge. That's not going to get you to the point that's necessary to win. That should pique your curiosity and have you start to examine things a lot deeper. The seeking out to acquire skill, so to speak, is more of the active process of digging into those concepts, those hypotheses, things of that nature. And personally, like that's the only way that I know how to study. It's even from day one pre-solver, like that was just it, right? Like even if you just date back to like before Black Friday, it was a lot of just ideas getting kicked around a collective group and then spending a lot of time with those ideas, stress testing them in some sort of capacity. So yeah, I mean, to everybody out there who's kind of on that journey, I think that that's the rinse and repeat template that's necessary, is just continually keep your eyes open and your ears available, I guess. Yeah, open. Available to like new ideas, and then get good at being able to stress test them, whether it's in game or through the use of tools. We can arrive at a lot of very specific skills by just, working things backwards and figuring out what makes it challenging for our opponent or easier for us. That's going to do it for us. We're off tomorrow as well as all of next week. I'll be back in Pittsburgh. So be sure to rejoin us. I guess it would be the 19th. I think that's the day I get back. Yeah, August 19th.
Feels like a long time away.
It does feel like a long time away. I think we'll be back at the normal noon time slot at that point, but it will be dependent upon me playing in Bobby's room and whatnot. So be sure to tune in then. I hope you guys enjoy the break from us as well as we enjoy the break from you. We'll see you guys all August 19th. See ya.
Later, squad.
Peace.